Hey guys, tonight we look up into a dark, quiet sky and find one warm point of light that seems to hold itself a little more steadily than the rest. A planet so bright and calm that for thousands of years people have stopped whatever they were doing, tipped back their heads, and felt that small, delicious shiver of wonder that comes from recognizing something familiar in the enormous dark. Before you get cozy, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy spending time here with me. And if you feel like it, post your location and your local time in the comments, because I always love seeing where in the world you're listening from while this giant world hangs somewhere above us, minding its own grand business. Let the world slow down for a moment. Let the fan murmur softly nearby, and let's slip into tonight's journey together. You notice Jupiter before you know much about it. That is one of its most relaxing qualities. It does not demand expertise. It does not require a telescope the size of a small cathedral or a graduate degree in celestial mechanics or the ability to pronounce every moon name without sounding like you are bluffing at a museum. It simply appears, bright, steady, a little golden, a little creamy, less sparkly than the stars around it, because stars often twinkle and flicker through the moving layers of Earth's atmosphere, while planets usually shine with a calmer, more settled light. Jupiter does this especially well. It arrives in the sky with the energy of someone who knows they are the tallest person in the room and feels no need to mention it. That calm brightness is part of why so many people across history paid attention to it. Long before cameras, apps, observatories, or overconfident science channels with suspiciously good microphones, Jupiter was one of the obvious wanderers in the heavens. Most stars hold their positions relative to one another, night after night, season after season, like they signed a silent agreement centuries ago and have been honoring it ever since. Planets do something different. They move, slowly, gracefully, almost with the patience of a hand sliding across a table. Ancient skywatchers noticed that. They saw a few bright lights that wandered against the fixed background stars, and those special lights became deeply important. Jupiter was one of the brightest and most impressive among them. The word planet itself comes from an old idea meaning wanderer, which is such a gentle and perfect description. Jupiter is a wanderer, but not in a frantic way. It does not rush. It does not zip around like it forgot its keys. It takes its time crossing the sky, making its way through the constellations with the confidence of something that has been doing this for billions of years and has no intention of changing its routine for anyone. You can almost understand why people once thought these wandering lights had personalities, intentions, moods, and influence. A bright object that moves among the stars without explanation would do that to you. It would feel alive. And Jupiter, of all the visible planets, has a kind of royal ease about it. Venus can be dazzling, almost shockingly bright, but Venus often clings close to sunrise or sunset, making dramatic entrances like a celebrity who knows the lighting is best near the horizon. Mars has its rusty red mystery and the permanent suggestion that something ancient and dusty is happening there. Saturn has the rings, which frankly is a bit unfair to the other planets. Jupiter has a different gift. Jupiter feels substantial, present, reliable. When it is up, it can dominate the night sky without looking flashy. It is the celestial version of someone entering a room and somehow making everything quieter. That steadiness is not just your imagination. When Jupiter shines in the sky, it often appears less twinkly than nearby stars because it presents a tiny disk rather than a true pinpoint of light. Your eyes cannot usually see that disk directly without optical help, but the atmosphere still treats it a little differently. The result is subtle, and once you notice it, you cannot really unnotice it. The stars may tremble and shimmer as warm and cool pockets of air bend their light, while Jupiter seems to hold itself together. It glows instead of glittering. It settles instead of sparkles. If the sky were a room full of whispered conversations, Jupiter would be the one calm voice speaking slowly enough that everyone can follow. That alone makes it a beautiful object for a sleep story, because even before you learn any facts about the planet itself, the act of seeing it already teaches you something soothing. Jupiter is one of those rare, cosmic things that rewards stillness. You do not need to chase it across the sky in a panic. You do not need to decode advanced charts on your first try. You look up, scan the dark, and there it is, often brighter than nearly everything around it, a pale lantern set among colder fires. It makes the sky feel less random. It gives your eyes somewhere to rest. For ancient people, that must have been even more powerful. Imagine a night with truly dark skies, the kind most modern cities have politely ruined with parking lots, billboards, and enough LED glare to interrogate the moon. In a world with no electric lights, the stars would have felt overwhelming in number, a river of brightness stretching from one horizon to the other. Against that crowded backdrop, Jupiter would stand out. It would have seemed special immediately. It had seemed special. Civilizations across the world noticed it, named it, tracked it, and folded it into stories about kings, gods, and heavenly order. In Roman tradition, the planet came to bear the name Jupiter, the king of the gods, which feels very on-brand. If any planet was going to walk into mythology wearing a cloak and a look of calm authority, it was this one. The Greeks associated it with Zeus. The Babylonians connected it to Marduk. In Chinese astronomy, it held deep significance too, linked with cycles of time and the structure of the heavens. Many cultures watched Jupiter because it was easy to see and because its motion was slow enough to follow, but noticeable enough to matter. It became one of the clocks in the sky, a marker of change measured not in frantic minutes, but in elegant seasons. That is one of the loveliest things about astronomy, when it is stripped of jargon and returned to simple human feeling. People did not first love the sky because they had equations. They loved it because it was there, and because certain lights behaved in ways that stirred curiosity. Jupiter did that beautifully. A bright wandering light is exactly the kind of thing that invites story. You can imagine a shepherd, a sailor, a farmer, a child standing outside a home with no walls but the horizon, glancing up and wondering why that one bright point had shifted since last month. Wonder begins very quietly, usually with one steady light. And then, much later, came telescopes, which somehow made Jupiter even better. There is something deeply charming about the first time a human points a small telescope toward Jupiter and realizes it is not just a bright dot, but a tiny world with shape. Even a modest backyard telescope can show you Jupiter as a round disk rather than a point of light. That experience feels almost rude in how quickly it changes your sense of scale. 1 second you're looking at a bright object in the sky. The next second you're looking at a planet. A real one. A striped one, if conditions are kind. Maybe with a hint of bands across its face. Maybe with moons nearby, lined up like tiny stars. Those moons are one of Jupiter's greatest acts of casual showmanship. Even though tonight belongs mostly to Jupiter itself as a bright wanderer in the sky, it is impossible not to smile at the fact that one of the most famous moments in astronomy came from looking at Jupiter and noticing little points of light near it that change position from night to night. Galileo saw them in the early 17th century and realized they were moons orbiting Jupiter. Suddenly, here was proof that not everything revolved around Earth. Jupiter had its own miniature system. The sky became less centered on us and more interesting because of it. That is a wonderfully humbling gift from a bright dot in the dark. Still, even without telescopes, Jupiter keeps its charm. It is visible enough to be democratic. You do not need special access. You do not need wealth. You do not need to attend a secret observatory gala where everyone pretends to enjoy dry cookies while discussing orbital resonances. Jupiter belongs to anyone willing to look up. In that way, it feels generous. The sky can seem intimidating when you think about the distances involved, but Jupiter softens that feeling by being so easy to spot. It meets you halfway. It also moves slowly enough that it teaches patience without ever becoming dull. If you look for Jupiter over several nights or weeks, You begin to notice its position shifting among the stars. Not dramatically, nothing theatrical. It is more like watching a clock hand you never knew was moving. This was one of the great discoveries available to the naked eye. The heavens were not frozen. Change was happening overhead, quietly, elegantly, all the time. Jupiter became one of the clearest signs of that gentle motion, reminding people that the sky was not a painted ceiling. It was a living system of cycles. And because Jupiter is so bright, it has a way of making even beginners feel like they are participating in something old and meaningful. You look up, identify it, and immediately join a line of human beings stretching back thousands of years who did exactly the same thing. Different languages, different fears, different homes, same sky, same planet, same small lift in the chest when you find it. The continuity is deeply calming. Human history can feel loud and messy and painfully inventive in all the wrong directions. But the experience of noticing Jupiter is wonderfully stable. People have done it through empires, through quiet villages, through deserts, islands, forests, fields, rooftops, observatories, and long ocean voyages. Jupiter kept showing up. There is something else relaxing about it, too. Jupiter is bright, but not sharp. It does not stab at the eye the way a harsh electric light does. It seems warm in color, especially when low in the sky, and there is a softness to the way your mind receives it. Maybe that is why it often feels companionable rather than alien. The universe is full of violent things, most of which are wisely very far away. And Jupiter certainly has its dramatic side. But from Earth, in the simple act of seeing it, it feels peaceful. It becomes a friendly giant in the distance, a silent presence, keeping watch while the smaller concerns of your day gradually lose their grip. You can imagine standing outside on a cold evening, your shoulders finally dropping after the day's nonsense has exhausted itself, and Jupiter waiting there as if it had been on duty the whole time. It would not solve your problems, obviously. Planets are famously poor at answering emails, but it would offer perspective. It would remind you that above the roofs, above the wires, above the little storms of human schedules and worries, something enormous and ancient is moving with magnificent patience. That feeling can be strangely comforting. The night grows larger. Your thoughts grow quieter. And that is where Jupiter begins to work its sleepy magic. Not with complicated facts at first, though those are coming in their own time, but with presence, with visibility, with the simple gift of being easy to find and wonderful to look at. Is the bright wanderer, the steady lamp, the old celestial king taking the long route through the stars without hurrying for anyone. You notice it, and the night feels organized around that noticing. The darkness becomes less empty. The sky becomes a place rather than a backdrop. And somewhere inside that soft recognition, curiosity starts to wake up very gently. Because once a planet can hold your attention with nothing more than its light, you begin to suspect that behind that calm golden glow lies something even more astonishing. That suspicion turns out to be very justified, because behind that calm little lantern in the sky is a planet so large that your mind almost refuses to hold it properly. You can say Jupiter is the biggest planet in the solar system, and that sounds clear enough for about 2 seconds, right up until your brain tries to picture what biggest means on a planetary scale and quietly walks out for a snack. Jupiter is not just a little larger than Earth, the way a large coffee is a little larger than a medium and somehow still gone in 10 minutes. Jupiter is enormous in a way that changes the feeling of space around it. It has the kind of size that makes nearby things seem more like accessories. You can start with the simplest image. If Earth were a grape, Jupiter would be something like a basketball. That comparison is imperfect because all these comparisons are imperfect, and space has a habit of humiliating every analogy you lovingly prepare for it, but it gets you close to the feeling. Jupiter is about 11 times wider than Earth. That is already a wonderfully unsettling number. 11 Earths lined up across the middle of Jupiter, one after another, would just about span its diameter. 11 versions of oceans, continents, clouds, storms, cities, deserts, forests, school pickup lines, grocery stores, awkward family group chats, and all the rest laid side by side. And Jupiter would still sit there like this was a perfectly normal amount of planet to be. The deeper calm comes when you move from width to volume, because width is only the beginning. Jupiter could hold more than 1,000 Earths inside it by volume. More than 1,000. That is one of those facts that keeps sounding fake no matter how many times you hear it. 1,000 Earths is already too much planet for one sentence. It feels greedy. It feels slightly show-offy. And yet, Jupiter manages to carry that scale with strange elegance. It does not look clumsy in the sky. It does not feel bloated or awkward. It is gigantic but graceful, which is a rare and impressive achievement even among planets. You can almost feel your imagination adjusting itself in stages. First, you think of Earth, because that is the only world your body really understands. Earth is home-sized. Earth is breathable and walkable and annoyingly full of bills. Then you try to multiply that world by 10, then by 100, then by 1,000. And somewhere in the middle, the numbers stop behaving like pictures and start behaving like weather. Jupiter becomes less like an object and more like an environment of scale itself, a vast sphere of depth and motion that does not fit neatly into the mental drawers you use for ordinary things. And still, for all that, Jupiter is only part of the larger pattern of cosmic excess. That is one of the most relaxing things about astronomy. Every time you think you have found the biggest, grandest, most ridiculous thing, the universe smiles politely and pulls back another curtain. Jupiter is the largest planet in our solar system, and it absolutely deserves the crown, but compared with the Sun, it is still much smaller. Compared with some stars beyond our solar system, even the Sun becomes modest. You do not need that fact to shrink Jupiter down. It actually makes Jupiter more lovable. Jupiter is huge enough to astonish you and still small enough to belong to a bigger story. It has majesty without loneliness. Its mass adds another layer to the picture. Jupiter contains more than twice the mass of all the other planets in the solar system combined. Mercury, Venus, Earth, Mars, Saturn, Uranus, Neptune, all gathered together in a tidy planetary committee, and Jupiter still outweighs them by a comfortable margin. That is such a deeply unfair statistic that it almost becomes funny. The solar system is not exactly a balanced ensemble cast. Jupiter walks in with the energy of the one actor who clearly has the biggest trailer, the best lighting, and a contract that allows no one else to stand too close during key scenes. But the beauty of Jupiter's size is that it does not come across as aggressive. Plenty of things in the universe are massive in a way that feels harsh or violent. Black holes have a certain dramatic flair. Supernovas are committed to the bit. Jupiter feels different. It is large in a rounded, luminous, weather-softened way. It wears its scale under layers of cloud. It turns that vast bulk into bands of cream and rust and gold. Even the word giant helps. Giant has a storybook gentleness to it. You can imagine a giant who is kind, or sleepy, or old enough to have lost interest in showing off. Jupiter gives that impression from far away. It is the giant who sits quietly and lets gravity do the talking. Gravity, of course, is where the size becomes truly physical. Jupiter's gravity is powerful enough to shape the space around it in dramatic ways. It holds onto a huge family of moons. It influences passing objects. It makes itself known. If you could somehow stand near Jupiter, which would be a very short and educational experience for several reasons, you would feel that pull immediately. Even from the safety of Earth, Jupiter's mass matters. It is not just sitting out there being decorative. It is helping organize part of the solar system simply by being so tremendously there. And yet, Jupiter also offers one of the most soothing paradoxes in astronomy. For all its size, it is not dense the way you might expect a gigantic thing to be. If you could imagine a truly colossal bathtub, one large enough to make several engineers burst into tears on sight, Jupiter would float in water. That image is absurd and lovely and impossible to resist. A planet so huge it could swallow 1,000 Earths, and yet made mostly of light elements, so overall less dense than water. You do not actually get to test this because no bathtub in the universe is being built for your science fair project, but the idea is delightful. It softens Jupiter further. It gives the giant a buoyancy you do not instinctively expect. That lower density comes from what Jupiter is made of. Earth is rocky and metallic, with a solid surface and a dense interior. Jupiter is made mostly of hydrogen and helium, the simplest and most abundant elements in the universe. In a sense, Jupiter is built from the same basic material as stars, just without enough mass to ignite as one. That makes it feel ancient in a special way. Jupiter is not merely a large object. It is a large object made from the most primal ingredients around, a huge globe of fundamental stuff gathered together early in the solar system's history and never entirely giving up that original character. You can feel the difference in personality there. Earth is intimate. Earth is details. Mud, bark, rain, stone, skin, coffee cups, sidewalks, moss on walls, the smell after a storm. Jupiter is broad and elemental. Hydrogen, helium, pressure, motion, light on cloud tops. It is a planet that seems to operate in sweeping gestures, a world made less of surfaces and more of layers. Even its size begins to feel less like architecture and more like atmosphere, less like a thing you would walk around and more like a thing you would enter and keep entering with no obvious end to the experience. That sense of vastness becomes even calmer when you remember how cleanly Jupiter seems to carry itself. There is nothing jagged about it in the sky. It appears as a bright, settled point because distance smooths everything out. All that mass, all that volume, all that strange floating grandeur, and what reaches your eyes is composure. A giant hidden inside a pearl of light. You would never guess just by looking that its diameter is about 88,000 miles. You would never guess that if Jupiter had been even more massive during its formation, it might have edged closer to becoming a kind of failed star, often called a brown dwarf in related discussions of substellar objects. Instead, it remained a planet, which feels like a very fortunate outcome for anyone who enjoys planetary elegance and prefers their solar system with a little variety. The more natural way to understand Jupiter's size is through feeling rather than statistics. You imagine approaching it from far out in space. At first, it is just a bright object, larger than a star, richer in color. Then it becomes a disk. Then the disk grows and keeps growing longer than your instincts expect. Earth taught your mind one scale. Jupiter gently breaks that lesson. It tells you that worlds can be wider, deeper, more massive, more layered, more extravagant. It invites you to expand your sense of what a planet can be. That invitation is part of why Jupiter has inspired such affection in astronomers and skywatchers. Saturn often wins the beauty contest because rings are hard to beat, and frankly, Saturn knows it. Mars gets a great deal of attention because humans enjoy imagining themselves heroically suffering on dusty worlds for unclear reasons. Jupiter earns devotion more quietly. You learn its size, and something in you relaxes rather than tenses. Here is a planet that does not merely exist. It abides. It carries a whole kingdom of scale inside itself. It makes Earth feel precious rather than small, because when you understand how large Jupiter is, you also understand how unusual it is to live on a world where your feet can rest on solid ground, and your weather usually stays above your head instead of becoming the entire definition of the place. There's also something comforting in the fact that Jupiter formed early, very early, during the solar system's youth. It gathered material while the sun was still young and the planets were still assembling themselves out of dust and gas and collisions and raw ambition. Jupiter became massive quickly, and once it reached that scale, it began shaping the development of the surrounding solar system. So when you look at Jupiter, you're not just looking at the biggest planet. You are looking at one of the old architects of the neighborhood, a giant that helped set the stage before Earth finished becoming Earth. That age adds dignity to its size. Jupiter is big, and it has been big for a very long time. Maybe that is why it feels so stable in the imagination. It has endured. It has carried its enormous self around the sun for billions of years, holding onto moons, wearing its cloud bands, shining into human eyes long before anyone wrote down numbers for its diameter or mass. People recognized its importance before they could explain it. They saw the bright wanderer and understood, at some instinctive level, that this was one of the great presences of the sky. The data only sharpened that feeling. The facts did not reduce the wonder. They gave the wonder structure. And size, when it is this graceful, can be strangely comforting. A vast tree can feel comforting. A mountain can feel comforting. The ocean can feel comforting from the shore when it is behaving itself and not auditioning for a disaster documentary. Jupiter offers that same emotional scale. It is so much larger than your daily life that your daily life begins to loosen around the edges. The inbox fades. The unfinished conversations fade. The little frictions of the day shrink a bit. Somewhere out there, moving with massive patience, is a planet that could fit 1,000 Earths inside itself and still appear in your sky as a calm golden light. That fact has a wonderful way of straightening out the perspective. You keep following that feeling, and Jupiter keeps rewarding it. Because once you accept that this giant exists, once your imagination finally stops protesting and starts cooperating, the next question arrives very naturally. What does a world that large even look like up close? What do those layers of cloud and gas do across such an enormous face? How does a planet made mostly of atmosphere turn size into beauty? And that is where Jupiter becomes even more mesmerizing, because the giant does not only carry scale. It carries weather painted across its vast body in slow, beautiful motion. That beauty is where Jupiter really starts to feel almost unreal. Because when you picture the largest planet in the solar system, you might expect something blunt and heavy, some giant brown lump with all the charm of industrial equipment. Instead, Jupiter looks like weather painted by someone with a very steady hand and a soft spot for cream, gold, copper, and pale rust. It does not wear its size like armor. It wears it like silk. The whole planet seems wrapped in bands and swirls that look as if they were brushed across its face in long, slow strokes, then gently stirred with a fingertip. Even in photographs, even through telescopes, even from millions of miles away, Jupiter has this strange talent for looking both massive and delicate at the same time. That is one of the most relaxing facts about it. Jupiter is not a world where weather happens above the landscape. Weather is the landscape. There is no familiar solid surface waiting underneath the clouds the way there is on Earth. No coastlines hiding under the mist. No mountains you could eventually reach if the fog cleared. No little patch of dry ground where someone could stand with a coffee and say this seems breezy. Jupiter is almost entirely a world of atmosphere, layer after layer after layer, deepening and changing as you go down, until the idea of a neat boundary between sky and planet starts to break apart. That alone makes Jupiter feel dreamlike in a way very few worlds do. On Earth, the air is something you move through on the way to something else. It is the space between you and the ground, between you and the ocean, between you and the next decision you're trying not to overthink it to in the morning. On Jupiter, the air is the place. The clouds are not decoration. They are the visible skin of an enormous globe made mostly of gas and pressure and motion. You're looking at atmosphere as architecture, weather as identity. And it is beautiful weather. The planet's face is arranged in broad horizontal bands that circle the globe from east to west or west to east, depending on the band. Some are lighter, some darker. Some are creamy white, some tan, some orange-brown, some touched with reddish color. Those alternating stripes are called zones and belts. The lighter zones are generally higher, colder cloud regions, while the darker belts are usually lower and warmer. Even that simple pattern has something soothing about it. Jupiter looks organized. It looks as though some enormous cosmic hand carefully combed its clouds into elegant ribbons. Of course, the truth is less tidy and much more interesting. Those bands exist because Jupiter rotates incredibly fast. For such a giant world, it spins at a remarkable pace, taking only about 10 hours to complete one rotation. That rapid spin stretches and shapes the atmosphere into strong jet streams that race around the planet. The result is a face divided into parallel lanes of weather, each one moving with its own speed and direction. It is a little like watching rivers of clouds slide past one another around a spinning globe, always flowing, always shifting, always keeping the larger pattern alive. That fast rotation gives Jupiter a certain visual rhythm. The bands feel musical in a way, like long notes laid across the planet's body. You can almost imagine the atmosphere humming. The clouds do not just sit there looking attractive for the cameras. They move, they curl, they rise and sink. They collide at the edges of the belts and zones and create turbulence, whirls, and eddies. Small storms appear. Larger storms absorb them. Patterns stretch out and fold back into themselves. The whole planet has the energy of cream stirred slowly into coffee, except the cup is wider than 11 Earths and the spoon is gravity. The colors come from chemistry, sunlight, and depth. The highest visible clouds are thought to contain ammonia ice, which helps create those pale upper regions. Deeper down, there are likely layers involving ammonium hydrosulfide and water clouds, and below even those, conditions become warmer, denser, stranger. The exact recipes behind Jupiter's colors are still being studied because Jupiter enjoys keeping some things to itself. It offers hints, not full confessions. Sunlight interacts with chemicals in the upper atmosphere and produces those warm tones that make the planet seem almost antique, as though it has been varnished by time. That color palette is one reason Jupiter feels softer than it really is. If the same planet wore stark grays and harsh blacks, it might come across as severe. But Jupiter's creams and ochres and rosy browns give it warmth. Even its shadows look gentle. There's an old-world richness to it, the kind of coloring you might find in polished wood, old maps, candlelight, desert stone, and late afternoon. It feels less like a machine and more like something painted, aged, and alive. And because the atmosphere is so deep, what you are seeing is only the upper story of a much larger structure. The cloud tops are the visible beginning of Jupiter, not the whole of it. That is a very strange thing for the human mind to sit with. On Earth, when you see clouds, you know what they are relative to. They float above the ground. They cast shadows on fields, cities, forests, or oceans. On Jupiter, those familiar reference points vanish. The cloud tops are not hanging above a recognizable world. They are simply the outermost visible layer of the planet itself. Looking at Jupiter means looking into depth without a floor. That creates a kind of sublime calm. There is no obvious place to land your imagination, so it keeps floating. You follow the bands around the curve of the planet. You watch storms twist into commas and loops. You see pale ovals, darker barges, feathery plumes, and little turbulent knots, all carried along by winds that can move much faster than the fiercest jet streams on Earth. Some of those winds roar along at hundreds of miles per hour. Yet from far away, the whole thing still looks serene. That contrast is one of Jupiter's great tricks. It turns violence into elegance by placing it on such a grand scale that the eye reads it as art. There is a quiet lesson in that. The planet is turbulent, but it appears calm. Its atmosphere is busy beyond anything most weather on Earth can manage. But from a distance it becomes smooth, composed, almost meditative. You do not need to force a metaphor out of that. It is already there, sitting politely in the sky. Scale changes emotion. Distance changes texture. A storm large enough to swallow worlds can become a soft brushstroke when you pull back far enough. The cloud bands also help explain why Jupiter has fascinated observers for so long. Even early telescopes could reveal that this was not just a blank disk. There were markings, structure, character. Jupiter had a face. That matters more than it might seem. A planet with visible features becomes easier to know, easier to remember, easier to love. When you look at Jupiter through a telescope and catch those bands for yourself, even faintly, the effect is immediate. The planet stops being an abstract fact and becomes a place with visible weather. That is a very intimate kind of wonder. You can imagine hovering high above those cloud tops, if only in the safest possible sense, because actually doing that would present several engineering difficulties and a truly unfortunate outlook for your continued existence. From above, the view would stretch outward in a vast curve of layered atmosphere. The lighter zones would glow softly. The darker belts would look deeper and more textured. White plumes might rise like fresh cream, pushed upward from below. In some places, the edges between bands would fray into turbulent patterns, where faster and slower winds shear against each other and carve the clouds into complicated shapes. Those edges are especially beautiful. Jupiter rarely does straight lines for very long. Its atmosphere likes ornament. It likes curls and loops and little disruptions. A band might look smooth at first glance, then reveal 1,000 subtle details as you look longer. Tiny storms bead along the boundaries. Swirls bloom and fade. Pale streaks feather across darker regions. It is the kind of world that rewards patience. The longer you look, the more alive it becomes. And there is something deeply relaxing about a planet that offers endless detail without demanding urgency. Jupiter's weather is not happening for you. It is not trying to impress you. It is not pushing content into your face with a thumbnail and 3 red arrows. It has been doing this for ages. Its clouds have been folding and flowing for billions of years. You happen to be here at a moment when human beings can see them clearly, and that feels like a privilege. The planet remains gloriously unconcerned. Even the idea of falling into Jupiter changes because of this. On a rocky planet, you picture descent as a journey toward ground. On Jupiter, descent means moving from one layer of cloud into another, then deeper into thicker atmosphere, then into regions of increasing pressure where gas behaves in less familiar ways. There is no simple landing in the usual sense. The deeper you go, the more Jupiter stops behaving like the kinds of places your body understands. The sky keeps becoming more sky. The world keeps becoming more itself. That does not mean Jupiter is vague or formless. Quite the opposite. Its atmosphere has structure, levels, chemistry, temperature changes, pressure gradients, and complex circulation. A spacecraft called Galileo even sent a probe into Jupiter's atmosphere in the 1990s, and for a little while that probe descended through the clouds, measuring conditions as it fell deeper and deeper into the giant world. It did not survive very long by human standards because Jupiter is not a forgiving host, but it gave us valuable glimpses into what those upper layers are like. Even that feels a little poetic. We sent a small machine into a planet made of weather, and for a brief time, it whispered back descriptions from inside the storm-soft skin of a giant. The more you sit with all of this, the stranger Earth begins to feel by comparison. Here, a cloudy day means the view is blocked. On Jupiter, clouds are the view. Here, weather passes over the world. There, weather is the world's expression. Here, the atmosphere is a thin blanket wrapped around a rocky body. There, the atmosphere is an enormous, deep, dynamic realm that defines nearly everything visible about the planet. Jupiter takes one familiar thing, the sky, and turns it into a planet-sized masterpiece. That may be why its images are so memorable. You do not just remember Jupiter as round. You remember it as banded, marbled, brushed, luminous. The atmosphere makes the giant personal. It gives the planet mood. And among all those flowing stripes and gentle colors, One feature has captured human attention more than any other: a long-lived storm so large and so famous that it almost feels like Jupiter's signature left on the face of the solar system. You can already see it waiting there in the turning clouds, reddish and patient, like a thought the planet has been thinking for a very long time. That reddish mark has been staring back at observers for so long that it barely feels like weather anymore. It feels like memory. It feels like a feature that Jupiter was born with, some permanent expression resting in the southern half of its face, as familiar as a dimple or a half smile. The Great Red Spot has that effect on people. You hear the name once, and it stays with you. It sounds dramatic, slightly overconfident, and a little too sure of its own branding, which is fair because very few storms in the known universe have managed to become instantly recognizable from hundreds of millions of miles away. And yet the thing itself is strangely calming to think about. It is a storm, yes, and a huge one, but it moves with such patience that it almost escapes the category of weather and becomes something closer to a long mood. On Earth, storms arrive, make a mess, and leave. They sweep in with all kinds of noise and urgency, ruin someone's weekend, and then break apart over land or water or colder air. Even the big ones usually live on human timescales. You can follow their paths on a map. You can say where they were last Tuesday. Jupiter does not care about your Tuesday. The Great Red Spot has been present for centuries. It was likely observed in some form in the 1600s, and astronomers have been watching it ever since, which means generations of human beings have been born, lived full, complicated lives, complained about the state of things, and disappeared, while this giant storm kept circling the planet like it had all the time in the world. That kind of longevity changes the feeling completely. A storm that lasts for a day feels dangerous. A storm that lasts for hundreds of years starts to feel dignified. The Great Red Spot becomes less like a burst of violence and more like a weather institution, an old tenant in Jupiter's atmosphere who has seen empires rise and fall on Earth and still has no plans to move out. There is something almost funny about that. Humanity has reinvented itself several times over since people first noticed this storm, and the storm is still there, spinning away like a giant cosmic shrug. Its scale helps with the awe. For a long time, the Great Red Spot was so large that more than one Earth could fit across it, which is an outrageous thing for a storm to be able to say about itself. In recent decades, it has been shrinking, and astronomers have noticed that its size has changed over time. Even so, it remains immense by Earth standards. You're not dealing with a cloud bank or a turbulent patch of wind. You are dealing with an atmospheric vortex broader than many people can meaningfully imagine, turning steadily within Jupiter's striped world. It is one of those facts that sounds less like meteorology and more like fantasy written by someone who was told to be realistic and took it as a personal insult. The color adds a lot to the mystery. It is not always the same shade. Sometimes it looks more orange, sometimes more brick red, sometimes a little paler, and its exact tone can shift over time. No one is completely certain what chemistry produces that color. Sunlight interacting with compounds in Jupiter's atmosphere is part of the story, and materials brought up from deeper layers may also play a role. But Jupiter keeps the final recipe just vague enough to remain interesting. That uncertainty suits the storm perfectly. If the Great Red Spot came with a fully explained label and a neat diagram and a tiny polite footnote saying here is precisely why I am red, it would lose a bit of its charm. Mystery is part of the appeal. The storm gets to remain slightly aloof, which is very on brand for something that has spent centuries rotating above the clouds like an old monarch, avoiding interviews. Its motion is beautiful in a way that still surprises people. The Great Red Spot is an anticyclonic storm, which means the air rotates around a high-pressure center. The winds around its edges are extremely fast, racing around the oval in a broad, powerful loop. But from far away, from the safe distance of telescope images and spacecraft portraits, the storm looks smooth, rounded, almost velvety. That contrast is one of Jupiter's finest tricks again. Tremendous motion disguised as stillness. violence translated into elegance through distance and scale. You could stare at images of the Great Red Spot for a long time and feel soothed by them, even while knowing the actual winds that would make most terrestrial weather look like a mildly annoyed table fan. And it really is oval, which somehow makes it even more distinctive. Not perfectly round, not jagged, not chaotic in outline, but elongated, settled into an atmospheric lane, held in shape by the surrounding jet streams. It sits between cloud bands like a jewel set into moving fabric. The belts and zones stream past. Smaller storms drift nearby. White ovals appear in neighboring regions. Turbulent patterns fray along the edges. Through all of that, the Great Red Spot remains recognizable. It is as if Jupiter has written its signature in cursive weather. That signature has not stayed completely unchanged. The storm has grown smaller over the years. We have measured it carefully, and its shape has evolved too. At times it has looked broader and flatter. At other times it has seemed rounder and more compact. There have been seasons when flakes or streamers of red material appeared to peel away from it into nearby clouds, which gives the impression of an ancient storm occasionally shedding little pieces of itself like paint drifting from an old but still magnificent wall. Rather than making it seem fragile, those changes make it feel alive. The Great Red Spot is not a museum exhibit sealed behind glass. It is a real weather system, still adjusting, still swirling, still interacting with the planet around it. Part of what keeps it alive is Jupiter's atmospheric structure. The giant planet is full of energy. Heat rises from within. Fast rotation shapes powerful jet streams. Neighboring bands move at different speeds. In that environment, vortices can form and persist for astonishing lengths of time. On Earth, continents, oceans, and surface friction complicate everything. Storms run into mountains, colder waters, drier air, and other barriers that sap their strength. Jupiter offers a much more open stage. There is no solid surface interrupting the action in the way your Earth-trained instincts expect. Its atmosphere is deep, layered, and dynamic, which allows giant systems like the Great Red Spot to keep going far longer than they ever could here. It is easy to imagine that such a storm must roar with endless rage, but there is another way to picture it that feels truer to the mood of Jupiter. Think of it as an old turning wheel in a vast machine of clouds, a steady circulation embedded in the giant's weather, enduring because the whole planet is built for motion on that scale. The Great Red Spot is not rushing toward an ending. It is simply continuing. That may be why it feels so strangely peaceful to contemplate. It is large beyond reason, old beyond everyday comprehension, and still it does not seem frantic. It just persists. The Juno spacecraft, which has been orbiting Jupiter in recent years, gave the world some especially stunning views. Its close passes revealed the Great Red Spot with a kind of clarity that makes your mind pause for a second, because the storm stops being a familiar in textbook pictures and becomes a landscape of swirling depth. Juno's data also showed that the storm extends deep below the visible cloud tops, far deeper than earlier generations might have guessed. It is not just a shallow stain in the upper atmosphere. It has structure plunging down into Jupiter's gaseous body, a deep atmospheric engine wearing a reddish face. Even that depth feels elegant rather than threatening. The Great Red Spot keeps refusing to become a simple villain. It is too beautiful for that, too old, too integrated into the planet's larger patterns. If anything, it makes Jupiter feel more personal. Without it, Jupiter would still be magnificent, but the Great Red Spot gives the planet a focal point, something unmistakable, something you can recognize the way you recognize the curve of a familiar coastline on a map. It turns the giant into an individual. And there is something gently humbling in knowing that human beings have spent centuries observing a storm they cannot stop, cannot touch, cannot fully explain, and cannot even watch all at once unless they rely on instruments and spacecraft and long chains of patient work. The storm reminds you that nature can operate on scales of time and size that do not need your permission. That realization could feel cold, but with Jupiter it somehow feels soothing. The Great Red Spot is so far away, so self-contained, so absorbed in its own ancient turning, that it becomes a source of wonder rather than anxiety. It asks nothing from you except attention. You can imagine old astronomers sketching Jupiter by lamplight, noticing the reddish oval again and again, returning to it through different nights and seasons, feeling the peculiar comfort of something distant yet dependable. The details might shift. The color might deepen or soften. The spot might shrink a little over generations. Still, it remains. It becomes a kind of celestial continuity. While Earth changes in all its noisy ways, that great old storm continues spinning in the dark, ancient and patient and slightly mysterious, like a thought Jupiter has never quite finished thinking. And once you begin to notice how long the storm has lasted, time itself starts to feel different around the planet. Jupiter has a way of stretching and folding time into odd shapes. Its signature storm can survive for centuries. Yet the giant itself spins so quickly that a full day there races past in only about 10 hours. The clouds keep moving. The planet keeps turning. The storm keeps holding its place in a larger rhythm. Everything is swift and slow at once. And the more you follow that strange balance, the more Jupiter starts to feel like a world living by a clock entirely its own. That strange clock is one of the loveliest things about Jupiter, because the planet seems to have made two completely opposite decisions about time and somehow committed to both. It spins with astonishing speed, so quickly that a single day there lasts only about 10 hours. Yet it takes nearly 12 Earth years to complete one trip around the Sun. So if you could somehow keep a calendar on Jupiter without the whole situation becoming immediately fatal and extremely inconvenient, you would live through brief, racing days inside a very long, lingering year. Morning and evening would come around in a hurry. Seasons, such as they are, would barely bother changing at all. It is a planet that hurries and lingers at the same time. That is deeply relaxing to think about. Maybe because it breaks your everyday sense of time so completely. On Earth, a day feels like a substantial unit. It can hold work, errands, meals, a mood swing or two, one small triumph, several unnecessary notifications, and at least one moment when you stand in a doorway and forget why you walked there. A year feels long. It has weather changes, holidays, birthdays, shifting routines, the slow growth of plants, the odd discovery that somehow it is already a different month than you thought. Jupiter rearranges those proportions. It spins so fast that a whole day flashes by in less than half an Earth day, but its year stretches out across almost a dozen of hours. Time that would feel elastic, almost dreamlike. The quick rotation is not a tiny detail tucked away in the fine print of planetary trivia. It shapes the entire planet. Jupiter is the largest planet in the solar system. It rotates faster than Earth. That speed is remarkable. At the equator, parts of the atmosphere are moving at thousands of miles per hour, simply because the whole world is turning so quickly. You can feel the grandeur of that immediately. An enormous globe, wider than 11 Earths, spinning once in about 10 hours, carrying its cloud bands around in a constant rush. No wonder the atmosphere organizes itself into stripes and jet streams and swirling ovals. The whole planet is moving with a kind of quiet urgency. That fast spin also changes Jupiter's shape. It is not a perfect sphere. It bulges outward around the equator and flattens a little at the poles. The effect is called oblateness, and Jupiter wears it proudly. The planet's equatorial diameter is noticeably larger than its polar diameter because the rapid rotation pushes outward most strongly around the middle. You can think of it as a giant world slightly puffed at the waist from spinning too fast, which is charming and also a little relatable after certain holidays. But on Jupiter, the effect is dramatic enough to measure clearly. The planet looks rounded, of course, yet it is subtly stretched by its own motion. Time leaves a visible mark on its body. That makes Jupiter feel even less like a static object and more like a living system. Its rotation is not just something happening in the background. It is written into the shape of the planet, the motion of the clouds, the structure of the winds, the formation of storms, the arrangement of the belts and zones. When you look at Jupiter, you're seeing time turn into weather. You're seeing speed translated into visible form. And still, despite that rushing day, the year remains gloriously slow. Jupiter orbits the Sun at an average distance of about 5 times Earth's distance. Out there, sunlight is weaker, softer, more diluted. The giant moves along a much larger path, and a full orbit takes around 11.86 Earth years. That means a child born on Earth would be nearly 12 years old before Jupiter completed a single year. A dog would have lived several very committed dog lifetimes. A houseplant would have suffered from inconsistent watering across an epic span of personal intentions. Jupiter would still be working through one patient orbit, circling the Sun with the same enormous calm it brings to everything else. There is something wonderful about that pace. The inner planets feel relatively brisk. Mercury whips around the Sun in a matter of weeks. Earth gets through the job in a year, which already feels long enough when your internet bill is due every month anyway. Jupiter takes its time. It moves through the darkness with royal patience. The bright wanderer you see from Earth is not wandering carelessly. It is following a grand, measured road around the Sun, one that takes nearly 12 years to complete. Ancient astronomers noticed this too. Jupiter's slow movement against the stars made it a useful marker of longer cycles, a planet associated with patience, breadth, and large-scale change. If you imagine standing somewhere high in Jupiter's atmosphere, safely held in the protective bubble of fiction, where you can observe impossible things without being crushed, frozen, poisoned, or turned into a cautionary tale, the quick days would be extraordinary. Sunlight would sweep across the cloud tops with surprising speed. The giant bands of cream and rust would rotate beneath the sky. Storms would move into view and slide away again. A sunrise and sunset rhythm would come quickly, giving the whole planet a pulse that feels almost eager. But the sunlight itself would be different from Earth's. Because Jupiter is so much farther from the Sun, day there would not look like bright noon in a clear tropical sky. The Sun would appear much smaller, still brilliant, of course, but reduced in size, a more distant lamp. The light reaching Jupiter would be only a fraction of what Earth receives. It would cast a softer overall illumination across the upper clouds. The atmosphere would glow rather than blaze. That adds to the sleepy mood of the planet. Even its daylight feels filtered and remote, as if the whole world lives in the mellow light of a late afternoon that never quite decides to become evening. Then there are the seasons, or more accurately, the relative lack of dramatic seasons. Earth gets distinct seasons because its axis is tilted by about 23.5 degrees. As Earth orbits the Sun, different hemispheres lean toward or away from that sunlight, and the result is the annual cycle of summer, autumn, winter, and spring. Jupiter's axis is tilted by only about 3 degrees. That is a very small tilt. So even though Jupiter takes almost 12 Earth years to go around the Sun, its seasonal changes are much more subtle. It does not lean enough to produce the dramatic swings Earth experiences. That is one of the most relaxing facts about Jupiter. Imagine living on a world with a very long year, but only gentle seasonal variation. No huge annual drama. No brutal flipping from one extreme to another because the planet decided to tip itself just enough to keep everyone buying different jackets. Jupiter remains more even in that sense. Its weather is fierce, yes, but not in the seasonal way Earth people usually mean. The giant's atmosphere is driven far more by internal heat and rapid rotation than by a strong annual cycle of sunlight. Jupiter shines with its own stored energy, radiating more heat than it receives from the Sun, which makes it feel even more self-contained. It is not waiting for the sun to tell it how to behave. That internal heat is an important part of Jupiter's strange relationship with time. The planet is still slowly shrinking under its own immense gravity, and that gradual compression releases energy. Deep inside, Jupiter generates heat that rises upward and helps power its atmospheric motion. So the great bands, the storms, the turbulence, the famous red oval, all of it is not merely a reaction to sunlight from outside. Much of Jupiter's drama comes from within. It carries its own energy source like a giant, patient furnace under miles of cloud. That makes the planet feel less like a passive body orbiting a star and more like an active world with its own deep rhythm. You can almost hear two clocks ticking there. One is fast, the 10-hour spin, the quick turn of daylight and darkness. The other is vast, the slow, 12-year orbit, the long drift around the sun. And beneath both is a deeper clock still, the timescale of Jupiter's own interior, the ancient release of heat, the persistence of storms that outlast generations, the slow reshaping of atmospheric patterns across decades and centuries. Jupiter is layered in time as much as in cloud. That may be why it feels so majestic. Smaller worlds often seem easier to imagine because their rhythms line up more closely with ours. Jupiter does not bother with that courtesy. It offers you short days and long years, swift rotation and patient orbit, ancient storms and subtle seasons. It reminds you that time in the universe is not standardized for your convenience. Different worlds keep different hours. Different planets build different calendars into their skies. Jupiter's calendar would feel almost mythical. A birthday would come after thousands of quick sunrises. Childhood would pass before 1 year was done. History would feel strange and stretched. And yet there is a gentle comfort in that. Jupiter's way of measuring time makes Earth feel both small and precious. Here, a day is long enough to hold a life's ordinary details. A year is short enough to feel manageable. On Jupiter, time becomes vast and fluid, measured in different proportions. The contrast makes your own world feel intimate. It also makes Jupiter feel beautifully other. Not hostile in the loud science fiction sense, not dramatic in the cheap cinematic sense, but quietly alien in the best possible way. It is a place where familiar words like day and year still apply, but they mean something slightly dreamier and far grander. Even the path Jupiter takes through the night sky connects to this. Because it moves so slowly around the sun, it spends long stretches appearing in particular parts of the sky relative to the stars. It becomes a seasonal presence for sky watchers on Earth, returning in cycles that feel stately rather than hurried. You see it bright in 1 year's evening sky, then in another season it shifts, then years later it turns up in different constellations. People can mark parts of their lives by where Jupiter was. It becomes a kind of long companion, showing up differently as the years pass. That has always been part of its charm. It is not just shine. It keeps time with you, though on terms much broader than your own. And because Jupiter spins so fast, the planet never really stops presenting new faces to the sun, to space, to anyone watching. Cloud bands race around. Storms rotate in and out of view. The great red spot appears, disappears over the limb, then returns after another turn. A single Earth night with a telescope can reveal real motion there, visible change across hours. That is such an extraordinary thing. Many celestial objects seem fixed during casual observation. Jupiter can show you movement in one evening. Its quick day lets you witness a world turning. There's something almost intimate about that. The biggest planet in the solar system, and it still allows human eyes to catch its rotation on a calm night through a backyard telescope. The giant remains approachable. You do not need to wait years to notice that it lives by a fast internal rhythm. The evidence is right there, in the turning bands, in the shifting position of the moons, in the slow reappearance of the storms. Jupiter is immense, but it is not shy. That combination of scale and accessibility is rare. A world with thousand Earth volume and centuries-old storms could easily have been distant in every emotional sense. Instead, Jupiter keeps offering ways in. First, the bright, steady light, then the giant size, then the bands of cloud, then the ancient red storm, and now this strange clock, this fast day and long year. This reminder that a planet can rotate like it is in a hurry while orbiting like it is nowhere else to be. The contrast is so elegant it feels almost deliberate, as though Jupiter wanted to teach the solar system that time does not have to come in one flavor. And as soon as you begin to settle into that rhythm, another layer of the giant's life comes quietly into view. Because Jupiter does not circle the sun alone. All around it, caught in that immense gravity, is a great family of moons, each with its own mood, its own character, its own strange little world. The giant keeps time not only through days and years, but through the graceful motion of companions endlessly circling around it. Those companions are part of what makes Jupiter feel less like a solitary planet and more like a whole moving kingdom. You first meet the giant as a bright point of light, then as an enormous banded world with a storm older than entire chapters of human history. And then, just when you think Jupiter has already given you enough to admire, you discover that it travels with an entourage. Around that calm, golden giant moves an entire family of moons, dozens and dozens of them, each one caught in Jupiter's gravity, each one adding another layer of beauty to the scene. It is one of the most comforting facts in the solar system. Jupiter is not alone, and somehow its greatness becomes even gentler because of that. There is something deeply satisfying about the image of a giant planet surrounded by smaller worlds. It gives Jupiter scale in a new way. Size can feel abstract until you see what it holds. A king is just a person in a nice chair until you see the court around him. A mountain becomes more dramatic when clouds drift around its slopes. Jupiter becomes more magnificent when you realize it has moons moving in steady circles around it, some tiny and irregular, some large enough to rival small planets, all of them part of one immense gravitational family. Even through a modest telescope, this can feel almost magical. You point the instrument toward Jupiter, and there it is, bright and striped if the view is kind, and beside it you notice tiny dots of light. At first they look like stars. Then you realize they're too neatly lined up, too close, too clearly associated with the planet. They shift from night to night. Sometimes there are 4 visible, sometimes fewer, because one may be hidden behind Jupiter or passing in front of it or lost in the giant's glare. Those little lights are moons, and once you realize that, the whole sky changes shape in your mind. You're no longer looking at one object. You're looking at a system. That was one of the great revelations of early telescopic astronomy. When Galileo observed Jupiter in 1610 and noticed 4 tiny points moving around it, he understood that they were not ordinary stars. They were moons in orbit around Jupiter. Today they are called the Galilean moons: Io, Europa, Ganymede, and Callisto. Their discovery was revolutionary because it showed that not everything in the heavens revolved around Earth. Jupiter had its own miniature world of circling bodies. It was like opening a door inside the sky and finding another smaller sky within it. And what a set of moons to discover. If Jupiter had gathered a dull collection of forgettable little rocks, it would still be impressive, but the giant seems to have a flair for quality. The 4 big moons are so distinct from one another that they feel like characters in a beautifully written novel, each with a different temperament, a different face, a different secret. They orbit the same giant, bathe in the same distant sunlight, shaped by the same immense gravity, and still they could hardly be more different. Io is the wild one, the restless one, the moon that seems unable to sit still for 5 minutes without something exploding. It is the most volcanically active world in the solar system. Not one of the most active. The most active. Its surface is dotted with volcanoes, lava flows and sulfur-rich deposits that painted in yellows, oranges, whites, and dark patches, giving it the look of a pizza someone made while very emotional and left under intense geologic pressure for several billion years. That description is unfair to Io's grandeur, but only slightly. It is beautiful in a fierce, strange way. The reason Io is so active comes from Jupiter's gravity and from the gravitational tug of neighboring moons. Io is squeezed and flexed as it moves through this complicated dance, and that constant kneading generates internal heat. So while Jupiter itself is the calm giant in the center, one of its closest children is a volcanic maniac, endlessly reshaped by fire. There's something almost endearing about that. Even in the most majestic cosmic family, one member is always dramatically processing a lot. Europa could not be more different. If Io is fire, Europa is ice and mystery. Its surface is bright and smooth, covered by a crust of water ice crossed with long dark cracks and streaks, as if someone gently scored the moon with a fine pen. It reflects sunlight beautifully. It has a clean, pale, quiet look, and that surface hides one of the most tantalizing possibilities in planetary science. Beneath the ice, there is strong evidence for a vast subsurface ocean of liquid water. An ocean, on a moon, under ice, quietly existing out there in the Jupiter system like one of the universe's most elegant little plot twists. That hidden ocean is one reason Europa has captured imaginations so powerfully. Water changes the emotional tone of a world. You hear about water, and suddenly the place feels less like a distant object and more like a possible environment, a world with depth, movement, maybe chemistry rich enough to support something like life. No one knows for sure whether life exists there, and Jupiter's moon kingdom is under no obligation to hand us easy answers, but Europa keeps that question alive in the most graceful possible way. It does not shout. It glows quietly and lets the mystery do the work. Then there is Ganymede, which somehow manages to be both understated and astonishing. Ganymede is the largest moon in the solar system. It is bigger than the planet Mercury. That fact alone is enough to make you sit up a little straighter. A moon bigger than a planet sounds like the kind of detail a bored universe invents just to keep astronomers from getting complacent. And Ganymede is not merely large. It has its own magnetic field, which makes it unique among moons. It carries this grand internal complexity with a kind of calm dignity, as if it has no need to be flashy, because being enormous and scientifically interesting is already quite enough for one moon. Its surface is a mixture of old, dark terrain and lighter, grooved regions, suggesting a long and complex history. Ganymede feels ancient but not dead, structured but not severe. It has layers, literally and emotionally. If Europa is the moon of quiet suspense, Ganymede is the stately giant child of the family, a world that could have been a planet under slightly different circumstances and seems perfectly aware of that fact without needing to mention it. And then Callisto waits farther out, darker, older looking, more heavily cratered, like a moon that has seen everything and decided to become philosophical about it. Callisto's surface is one of the most ancient and battered in the solar system, covered with impact scars that have remained for ages. It does not have Io's fiery theatrics, or Europa's icy intrigue, or Ganymede's oversized authority. It has something calmer. It feels remote, patient, almost monastic. Callisto looks like a world that has been keeping long, silent records in stone, while the rest of the family got caught up in their own dramatic specialties. Together, these four large moons create a kind of emotional spectrum around Jupiter. Fire, ice, grandeur, silence. And because they are bright enough to be seen in a small telescope, they make Jupiter feel approachable in a way very few planetary systems do. You do not need to read a paper or sit through a lecture or pretend you always knew the difference between a moon and a moonlet. You can simply look, and there they are. Tiny, clean points of light beside the giant. Their changing positions tell the story. They're not fixed. They're in motion. You can witness the dance for yourself. That dance is especially elegant because the inner three Galilean moons, Io, Europa, and Ganymede, are locked in a gravitational rhythm called orbital resonance. Their orbital periods are linked in a precise pattern. That sounds technical, but the feeling of it is beautiful. It means these moons are not just circling Jupiter independently, like distracted shoppers in different aisles. They are connected. Their motions influence one another in a repeating relationship, a cosmic rhythm that helps drive the tidal heating inside Io and shapes the dynamics of the whole system. The Jupiter family is not random. It is musical, and beyond those famous four lies a much larger crowd. Jupiter has many more moons, more than 90 confirmed so far, and the count can change as astronomers refine observations and discover new tiny outer companions. Some of those moons are small and irregular, likely captured objects that did not form alongside Jupiter in the same neat way as the big inner moons. They move on tilted or even backward, retrograde orbits, as if they came from elsewhere and were caught by the giant's gravity long ago. That adds another layer of charm. Jupiter is not only a parent to moons formed in its orbit, it is also a collector. The outer moon system starts to feel a little like a box of mismatched treasures gathered over immense stretches of time. Small rocky fragments, irregular shapes, odd orbital paths, little relics of ancient collisions and captures. Jupiter's gravity is so strong, so influential, that it can hold onto this varied company. Close in. The great regular moons circle in stately order. Farther out, smaller and stranger bodies wander in looser, more chaotic arrangements. The result is a moon system with both elegance and rough edges, like a royal court that includes polished nobles, mysterious outsiders, and at least a few characters no one fully remembers inviting. You can see why this is so relaxing to think about. Jupiter is already a giant, already layered with cloud and ancient weather, already keeping its own strange fast-slow calendar, and still it has room for all these companions. The giant planet becomes a center of gravity in an emotional sense too. Worlds gather around it. Motion organizes itself around it. Light points line up beside it in the telescope eyepiece and make the solar system feel intimate. Jupiter is vast, but is not empty. There is also a quiet tenderness in the idea that each moon experiences Jupiter as an enormous presence in its sky. On Io, Europa, Ganymede, or Callisto, Jupiter would loom overhead as a gigantic striped globe, many times larger than our moon appears from Earth. Its cloud bands would dominate the heavens. The Great Red Spot might be visible from some locations and times. The giant would hang there with terrifying beauty, filling the sky with cream and rust and shadow. That image is almost too magnificent to hold. These moons do not merely orbit Jupiter in an abstract diagram. They live under its gaze. And because many of them are tidally locked, showing the same face toward Jupiter all the time, the giant would remain fixed in the same part of their sky. Imagine growing up on such a world. If such growing up were possible, with Jupiter always there, a permanent celestial presence, not rising and setting the way our moon does, but hanging immense and constant above the horizon of your life. You would build myths around it instantly. You would never stop looking up. Even from Earth, that sense of kingdom reaches you. When you watch Jupiter and its moons, you are seeing gravity made visible. You are seeing one massive world shaping the paths of smaller ones in real time. The view is clean and simple, which is part of its beauty. No complicated chart is required to feel the truth of it. There's the giant. There are the attendants. The whole scene feels ordered, serene, and old. It gives the solar system a touch of ceremony. And still, Jupiter keeps a few quiet details in reserve. A giant with a moon kingdom might already seem complete enough, but it turns out this planet also wears rings. Not the bright, glamorous rings Saturn tosses around for attention like a cosmic fashion icon, but something subtler, something almost shy. Jupiter has its own delicate halo of dust, so faint that for ages the giant kept that elegance nearly hidden, as though it preferred understatement after all. That understatement suits Jupiter beautifully. Saturn may be the planet that walks into every room wearing a full chandelier and waiting for applause, but Jupiter has always had a quieter style. It does not need flashy accessories to make an impression. It is already the largest planet, already banded like living marble, already surrounded by a moon kingdom, already carrying a storm that has outlasted entire eras of human thought. And still, tucked so gently around it that most people never think to mention them, Jupiter has rings. Faint rings, dusty rings, rings so delicate they feel less like jewelry and more like a secret. There is something instantly charming about that. A giant planet with rings you can barely see sounds like the solar system practicing restraint for once. Jupiter does not advertise them the way Saturn does. It does not send them out ahead as a public relations team. For a long time, many people simply did not associate Jupiter with rings at all. If you ask someone to picture Jupiter, they would usually think of bands, storms, maybe the Great Red Spot, maybe the 4 big moons if they were feeling very organized. Rings belonged to Saturn in the popular imagination. Saturn had claimed the brand so thoroughly that Jupiter's own ring system felt almost like a whispered correction from the universe. Yes, that giant has rings too. It just wears them with more discretion. That discretion is not because the rings are unimportant. It is because they're made of different stuff and behave in a different way. Saturn's rings are broad and bright because they are made mostly of water ice, and ice reflects sunlight beautifully. Jupiter's rings are much darker and far fainter. They are composed mostly of dust, tiny particles that do not catch the light with nearly the same dramatic flare. The result is a ring system that is difficult to see from Earth and was only discovered in 1979 when a Voyager 1 spacecraft flew past Jupiter and noticed a thin, dim halo of material around the giant planet. It is one of my favorite kinds of discoveries, the kind where a familiar world suddenly reveals that it has been quietly more elegant than anyone realized. And once you know the rings are there, Jupiter changes ever so slightly in your imagination. The planet becomes even more complete, more layered, more refined. You start to picture that huge, striped world, not just with its clouds and storms and moons, but with a soft skirt of dust circling around it, thin and subtle and almost ghost-like. There's a strange tenderness in that image. The giant no longer feels merely powerful. It feels adorned. The rings themselves are not a single solid band. Jupiter, being Jupiter, prefers a more interesting arrangement. There's a faint inner halo close to the planet, a thin main ring farther out, and then broader, more diffuse outer rings, sometimes called gossamer rings. That word, gossamer, is perfect for them. It gives the whole system the right mood. These are not heavy architectural structures dominating the scene. They are airy, delicate, almost thread-like in their visual effect. If Saturn's rings feel like carved glass, Jupiter's feel like fine dust caught in a shaft of light. The origin of those rings is one of the most quietly satisfying parts of the story. They are not ancient frozen slabs left over in some grand, untouched arrangement. They are continuously replenished by dust from small inner moons. Tiny meteoroids strike the surfaces of those moons, kicking up material into space. Some of that dust escapes the moon's weak gravity and ends up orbiting Jupiter, creating and maintaining the faint ring system. That means the rings are not static ornaments. They are part of an ongoing conversation between Jupiter and its little inner companions, a soft exchange of dust and motion. There's something almost poetic about that. The rings exist because small moons are gently struck, releasing fine material that spreads into orbit around the giant. It is not the kind of violent process the mind instantly dramatizes. It is more like a constant whisper of particles, a delicate shedding that becomes visible only when enough dust gathers in the right place. Jupiter's rings are made of aftermath, so fine it looks like light itself decided to linger. Those little moons deserve their moment too. Metis, Adrastea, Amalthea, and Thebe are among the inner moons most closely tied to the ring system. They are much smaller and less famous than the great Galilean moons, but they help give Jupiter this extra veil of beauty. Amalthea, in particular, has always had an odd, endearing presence in the Jupiter system, an irregular reddish moon orbiting close to the giant. Thebe, too, farther out, contributes dust that helps create one of the broader outer rings. These are not worlds that dominate textbooks or steal headlines, but they matter. Jupiter's hidden elegance rests partly on the work of these modest little companions, and the rings really are hidden, at least compared with Saturn's. If you could approach Jupiter in space, their appearance would depend very much on the angle of the light. Under some conditions, they would be easier to see when backlit by the sun, with dust particles scattering the light into a soft, glowing structure. From other viewpoints, they might seem almost to disappear, fading into the darkness so thoroughly that the giant planet would look bare again. That changing visibility makes the rings feel even more elusive, as though they are choosing when to reveal themselves. It is easy to love that kind of beauty. Not everything has to arrive with a spotlight and theme music. Some of the most soothing things in nature are the ones you notice only after slowing down. The scent of rain before it starts. The pale line of dawn before sunrise. The quiet color inside seashells. Jupiter's rings belong to that category. They reward attention. They are part of the giant style, but not in an obvious way. Once you learn they exist, you carry the knowledge like a private detail, and the planet becomes richer for it. The halo ring closest to Jupiter is especially interesting because it is thick and diffuse, more like a glowing cloud of particles than a crisp band. It gives the planet a kind of soft inner mist. Farther out, the main ring is flatter and brighter by Jupiter standards, though still faint overall. Beyond that, the gossamer rings spread outward, tied to the orbits of moons like Amalthea and Thebe, becoming wider and more transparent. The whole system has a layered subtlety that feels perfectly matched to Jupiter's personality. Even its rings come in atmospheric gradients instead of bold declarations. And because Jupiter is such a powerful source of gravity and radiation, the environment around those rings is not gentle in the everyday sense. Charged particles, magnetic forces, and constant motion shape the region around the planet. Yet once again, Jupiter turns a complicated and energetic reality into something visually serene. The rings float there in soft arcs while the deeper machinery of the planet hums invisibly underneath. That may be one of Jupiter's deepest talents. It keeps translating intensity into grace. The more you think about the rings, the more they seem like a natural extension of everything else the planet has already shown you. Jupiter likes layers. It likes cloud bands, nested atmospheres, families of moons, deep storms, and gradual transitions between visible beauty and hidden force. The rings fit that pattern perfectly. They're another layer wrapped around the giant, another quiet band of structure adding refinement to the whole. Even the fact that they are dark and dusty rather than bright and icy suits Jupiter's color palette. Saturn's rings feel brilliant and theatrical. Jupiter's feel warm, muted, smoky, almost in harmony with the creamy browns and pale ochres of the cloud tops. There's also something very humanly comforting in being reminded that famous things still have private details. We think we know Jupiter because we have seen the pictures, learned the basic facts, maybe spotted it in the sky, maybe traced its moons through a telescope. Then the giant casually reveals that it wears rings too, just not the kind that shout for your attention. It is like learning that a familiar old building has a hidden garden in the back, or that someone you have known for years has a quiet skill they never bother to mention. The discovery does not overturn your sense of them. It deepens it. In a more visual mood, you can imagine drifting near Jupiter and seeing the ring system stretched around the planet as a thin, dusky circle, faint against the dark, the giant world rising huge behind it. The cloud tops would glow softly. The rings would cut a gentle line across space. Small moons would move nearby, some half-lit, some passing through shadow, all of it held together by gravity with extraordinary calm. It would be one of the loveliest sights in the solar system, precisely because it would not be overwhelming at first glance. It would ask you to look longer. That longer look keeps paying off with Jupiter. Every time you slow down, another layer appears. First brightness, then scale, then weather, then ancient storms, then strange time, then the moon kingdom, and now these almost invisible rings, proof that the giant has been carrying an extra measure of grace the whole time. No wonder Jupiter has held human attention for so long. It keeps meeting curiosity with another soft surprise. And yet, even with rings and moons and storms and cloud bands, Jupiter is not simply a beautiful object sitting decoratively in the outer solar system. Its size has consequences. Its gravity reaches far. Its presence changes the paths of other things. For ages, people have liked the idea of Jupiter as a kind of cosmic guardian, a giant bodyguard standing out beyond the inner planets, and helping keep some of the solar system's wandering debris from turning our neighborhood into even more of a demolition site than it already was. That picture is a little simplified because the universe does enjoy refusing perfect slogans, but there is a deep, comforting truth inside it. Jupiter does help shape what comes inward and what gets flung away. The giant is not only elegant, it is influential. That influence is one of the reasons Jupiter feels almost protective in the human imagination. You picture the inner solar system with its smaller rocky planets, including Earth with all its oceans and weather and tiny anxious creatures checking messages under blankets. And farther out sits this enormous giant with gravity powerful enough to shape the motions of countless objects. It is very tempting to think of Jupiter as the solar system's big bouncer, the one standing near the entrance, deciding which troublemakers get redirected, which get trapped, and which get flung so far away they never bother the inner world again. That image is not perfect, but it is comforting, and like many comforting ideas in astronomy, it contains a real piece of truth wrapped in a story your mind can hold. Jupiter's gravity is so strong that it does not simply orbit the sun and mind its own business. It actively influences the architecture of the solar system around it. Asteroids, comets, dust, small icy bodies, wandering fragments left over from the solar system's rough early days, all of these can feel Jupiter's presence. Some get nudged into new paths. Some are captured, temporarily or permanently. Some are accelerated, redirected, or thrown outward. The giant has been doing this for billions of years. It has not just been shining in the sky like a decorative lantern. It has been rearranging traffic. That traffic was far worse in the early solar system. Back then, everything was messy. Planets were forming, colliding, migrating, sweeping up debris, and generally making the sort of glorious disorder that eventually produces a stable neighborhood if you give it enough time and a lot of gravity. Jupiter formed early and grew quickly, which meant it became a major player before many other things had settled down. Once it reached that tremendous size, its gravity began shaping the orbits of nearby material in serious ways. It carved gaps. It stirred populations of smaller bodies. It helped determine where some things could remain and where others would be destabilized. So when people describe Jupiter as a protector of Earth, they're drawing on that larger reality. Jupiter's gravity can intercept some comets and asteroids that might otherwise travel deeper into the solar system. It can absorb impacts itself. It can fling objects away entirely. Over immense stretches of time, that influence matters. It changes probabilities. It changes trajectories. It changes the general level of chaos reaching inward toward the rocky worlds. One of the most dramatic reminders of this came in 1994, when comet Shoemaker-Levy 9 collided with Jupiter. The comet had been torn apart by Jupiter's gravity during an earlier close approach, stretched into a chain of fragments, and then those fragments slammed into the giant planet one after another. From Earth, astronomers watched dark scars appear in Jupiter's atmosphere, bruises larger than our whole planet in some cases, marking the impact sites. It was an extraordinary event. The solar system briefly became very direct about what Jupiter is capable of. Here was the giant literally taking a hit from incoming debris in full view. That image stayed with people because it felt so clear. Earth had not been in the path of that comet. Jupiter had, and Jupiter, immense and thickly atmospheric, absorbed the impacts in a way no fragile human civilization ever could. It is difficult not to feel grateful, at least a little. The giant seemed to demonstrate its job description in public. Massive world, strong gravity, incoming trouble, problem handled, more or less, though with some spectacular atmospheric scarring along the way. Of course, the full truth is a little more complicated because Jupiter is not a perfectly benevolent security guard carefully screening every dangerous visitor with your comfort in mind. Gravity is not a moral system. It does not wear a badge. Jupiter can protect the inner solar system in some cases, but it can also perturb objects onto new paths that may bring them closer inward. It is better to think of Jupiter as a giant gravitational manager of chaos, rather than a simple shield. It reduces some threats, redirects others, and generally makes the solar system more dynamic. Still, even a nuanced version remains awe-inspiring. The giant matters enormously, and there is something soothing about the scale of that mattering. Jupiter's influence is not frantic. It does not swat objects around like a panicked person trying to catch a moth in the kitchen with a dish towel and poor judgment. Its effects unfold over long periods through repeated gravitational encounters, orbital resonances, and deep time reshaping of pathways. Even when Jupiter dramatically captures your attention, the underlying process is patient. The giant works by being there, massively there, year after year, orbit after orbit, exerting its pull with perfect consistency. That consistency is part of what makes the asteroid belt so interesting too. The belt lies between Mars and Jupiter Jupiter's gravity plays a major role in shaping it. Long ago, material in that region never came together into a full planet, and Jupiter's powerful influence helped keep the area stirred up. The giant's repeated gravitational tugs created gaps in the asteroid belt, places where objects are less likely to remain because orbital resonances with Jupiter gradually destabilize them. These empty zones are one of those elegant signatures of invisible force. Jupiter writes patterns into space without touching anything directly. It leaves absences as evidence. Those resonances sound technical, but the feeling behind them is simple and lovely. Imagine countless rocky fragments circling the sun, each with its own pace, and Jupiter farther out, keeping a giant rhythm. If one of those smaller bodies falls into a repeating timing pattern with Jupiter, the giant's gravitational nudges can build up little by little until the orbit changes. It is like a patient hand tapping the same note again and again until the whole melody shifts. Jupiter does not need to shove very hard. It only needs to remain immense and faithful to its own motion. Comets feel Jupiter's influence especially strongly because many of them travel on long, stretched-out orbits that bring them through the giant planet region. Some are diverted. Some are captured for a time into shorter-period orbits. Some are sent inward, where they may become visible from Earth as spectacular visitors with glowing tails. Some are ejected outward, flung into distant space. Jupiter acts almost like a cosmic customs officer with an extremely broad interpretation of acceptable route changes. Very few small bodies pass through its domain unchanged. That means some of the beauty we enjoy from Earth may carry Jupiter's signature too. A comet appearing in our skies is not necessarily a simple gift from the outer darkness. It may have had its path altered by Jupiter somewhere along the way. The giant can be both guardian and arranger, reducing certain dangers while also delivering occasional visitors. That balance feels right. A world this grand should not be reduced to one sentimental label. Jupiter is not merely keeping watch. It is participating in the larger choreography of the solar system. Still, for a sleepy mind listening in the dark, it is perfectly fair to enjoy the comforting version for a while. Out beyond the inner planets, there's a colossal world with enough gravity to catch, scatter, swallow, or redirect all kinds of wandering debris. Earth is not alone in the path of things. There's a giant farther out, doing giant work. Even when the details are more subtle than the myth, the feeling remains useful. Jupiter makes the solar system feel less flimsy, less exposed, more structured. That feeling becomes even richer when you remember how many impacts Jupiter itself has likely endured. The Shoemaker-Levy 9 event was only the one we got to watch so clearly. Over time, astronomers have seen other impact flashes on Jupiter too, brief bursts of light as smaller objects slammed into the atmosphere. The giant gets hit. It wears some of the solar system's incoming violence and keeps going. Its atmosphere heals over. The cloud bands continue. The great red spot keeps turning. There's a stoic grandeur in that. Jupiter is sturdy enough to take blows that would be catastrophic elsewhere and remain unmistakably itself. And because Jupiter is so large, it presents a big target. That matters. If an object is wandering through that part of the solar system, Jupiter is hard to miss. It combines enormous size with strong gravitational reach, giving it an outsized role in intercepting material. It is the largest body after the Sun, and it behaves like it. The solar system is not a democratic arrangement of equal worlds politely sharing orbital space. It is a hierarchy of masses, and Jupiter sits near the top of the planetary order with all the calm authority that implies. You can even think of the giant as helping shape the conditions under which Earth's long, quiet history became possible. Without Jupiter's presence, the inner solar system might have evolved differently. The patterns of impacts, asteroid distributions, and comet pathways could have changed in ways that made Earth's story less stable. There's plenty scientists still debate about the exact balance of Jupiter's protective and disruptive roles, and that debate is part of what keeps the topic alive and honest. But no one doubts that Jupiter has been a major influence. It helped write the setting in which the rocky inner planets lived out their histories. That idea can feel strangely personal, even though it happened on scales far beyond individual life. Your ordinary night on Earth, with a ceiling fan turning, a window dark, the day finally giving up its noise, exists inside a solar system whose shape was partly defined by that giant world. Jupiter did not just give you something bright to look at in the sky. It helped sculpt the broader environment in which Earth became a place where oceans lasted, climates evolved, life persisted, and eventually somebody decided to listen to sleep stories about gas giants instead of making healthier choices with their bedtime. And the giant accomplishes all this without losing its beauty. That may be the most enchanting part. Jupiter could have been influential in a purely abstract way, some unseen accountant of celestial mechanics. Instead, it is magnificent, cloud-banded, storm-crowned, moon-ringed, softly luminous, and quietly powerful. Its gravity reaches through space while its light reaches human eyes. It is useful and beautiful at once, which is honestly a little unfair to the rest of the planets. The more you follow Jupiter's role as a shaper of paths, the more alive the whole solar system starts to feel. Nothing is isolated. The moons dance because of gravity. The asteroid belt bears Jupiter's marks. Comets change course. Even invisible dust and small fragments respond. The giant is a center of order and disturbance at once, a world whose mass reaches outward and leaves fingerprints on things far beyond its cloud tops. It turns emptiness into relationship, and somewhere inside all that influence is another kind of music. Jupiter does not only speak through gravity. It crackles with lightning, glows with auroras, and sings in radio waves. The giant that shapes the paths of comets also fills space with energy and light in ways both visible and invisible, as though being the solar system's great bodyguard was not quite enough, and it needed to become a kind of orchestra too. That orchestra feels almost impossibly rich once you begin to hear it in your imagination, because Jupiter is not only a giant world of clouds and gravity. It is also a world of light, electricity, magnetism, and strange invisible music. From far away, it looks calm, the same patient lantern in the sky you first noticed with such ease, but around and above those pale cloud tops is a whole drama of energy playing out in forms both beautiful and deeply weird. Jupiter flashes with lightning inside its storms. It glows with auroras near its poles. It pours radio waves into space. The giant planet does not just move through the darkness. It hums, crackles, and shines in ways that make it feel less like a silent object and more like a living instrument. The lightning is a good place to linger first, because lightning on Jupiter carries something wonderfully familiar into a completely unfamiliar setting. You know what lightning feels like on Earth, at least from a safe distance. A hot summer storm builds. The sky darkens. The air feels charged. A flash cuts through the clouds, and for one instant, the whole world looks sharpened and silver. Thunder follows like a delayed opinion. On Jupiter, there is lightning too, but on a scale that makes Earth storms feel like neighborhood arguments heard through a wall. For a long time, scientists suspected Jupiter had lightning because spacecraft detected radio signals associated with storm activity, and later images confirmed bright flashes in the atmosphere. These bolts form deep in Jupiter's water-rich storm clouds, where rising and sinking material separates electric charge, much the way storm systems on Earth do. There is something surprisingly comforting about that continuity. Across enormous differences in size, chemistry, and pressure, nature still arrives at lightning through the same general logic. Build turbulence, separate charges, release the imbalance in a flash. Even on the largest planet in the solar system, the universe still likes a good storm. But Jupiter's storms are not just bigger versions of earthly weather. The planet's internal heat, rapid rotation, and deep atmosphere create a setting where convection can become immense. In some regions, especially near the poles, spacecraft have observed clusters of powerful storms where lightning flashes through the upper darkness. The Juno mission revealed many of these bright discharges, including shallower lightning in places scientists did not always expect. Jupiter once again proved that it had read the assignment and decided to improvise. The idea of lightning near Jupiter's poles is especially lovely because on Earth the most energetic thunderstorms tend to favor warmer, more familiar regions. Jupiter likes to keep things interesting. In its polar areas, towering storms can rise through the atmosphere, with bright lightning flickering inside like someone briefly switching on lamps in a palace made of cloud. You picture those flashes deep within huge rolling systems of ammonia and water, momentary bursts of brilliance inside a world already painted in creams and rusts and shadow. It is violent weather, certainly, but from a distance it becomes mesmerizing instead of frightening. That distance matters so much with Jupiter. Everything intense there arrives, softened by scale and remoteness. A lightning bolt on Earth feels immediate, a sharp event inside your own weather. Lightning on Jupiter feels majestic, almost ceremonial. You're not caught in it. You are witnessing it across space, where danger becomes pattern and raw force becomes part of the giant's overall grandeur. The planet can afford to be dramatic because it is so far away. It becomes the safest possible place to appreciate extreme weather from a nice, comfortable distance where no one is asking you to evacuate or secure patio furniture. And then there are the auroras, which may be the most hauntingly beautiful things Jupiter does with light. Earth has auroras too, of course, those flowing curtains and arcs of green, red, and violet that shimmer near the polar regions when charged particles from the sun interact with our magnetic field and atmosphere. They are beautiful enough here to make people stand outside in the cold, forgetting every practical detail of their lives. Jupiter takes that familiar beauty and turns it up to planetary myth. Its auroras are the most powerful in the solar system. That alone is such a wonderfully extravagant fact. Jupiter cannot merely have polar lights. It has to have the biggest, brightest, most intense auroras around, because apparently being the largest planet, the keeper of the Great Red Spot, the host of the Moon Kingdom, and the general solar system bouncer was not quite enough. The giant wanted a crown of light, too. The reason lies in Jupiter's magnetic field, which is enormous and extraordinarily strong. In fact, Jupiter has the strongest planetary magnetic field in the solar system. The region dominated by that field, its magnetosphere, is vast beyond ordinary intuition. If you could somehow see Jupiter's magnetosphere with your eyes, it would appear enormous in the sky, stretching millions of miles outward, shaped by the solar wind into a gigantic teardrop-like region trailing far into space behind the planet. It is a structure so large that it stops feeling like a field and starts feeling like a kingdom made of invisible force. Charged particles become trapped within that magnetic field, spiraling along its lines toward the poles, where they crash into the upper atmosphere and create auroral glow. Some of those particles come from the solar wind. But one of the most fascinating things about Jupiter is that much of the material feeding its auroras also comes from within its own moon system, especially from Io. That volcanic moon, endlessly throwing sulfur and oxygen into space, supplies material that becomes ionized and caught in Jupiter's magnetic environment. So the giant's auroras are not just a conversation between Jupiter and the Sun. They are partly a conversation between Jupiter and one of its own moons. That is such a rich and elegant detail. The family is involved in the light show. You can imagine it almost as a chain of transformation. Io erupts. Material escapes. Jupiter's magnetosphere captures it. Charged particles race along magnetic pathways. The poles of the giant ignite in ultraviolet, infrared, and other wavelengths, producing luminous ovals and flickering features that circle the high latitudes. The whole system feels connected, almost musical in the way one instrument sets another vibrating across the room. From Earth, our eyes cannot simply look up and see Jupiter's auroras the way people under dark skies can sometimes see the northern lights. Most of Jupiter's auroral brilliance is especially strong in ultraviolet light, which means spacecraft and special instruments are needed to study it properly. But perhaps that makes it even dreamier. These are hidden crowns of light, constantly burning above the poles of a distant giant, invisible to casual sight and yet magnificently real. Jupiter carries its own secret northern and southern lights, endlessly active in the dark. The shapes of those auroras can be astonishing too. Their glowing main ovals encircling the poles, along with spots and arcs connected to interactions with certain moons. Io leaves a magnetic footprint. Europa and Ganymede can as well. That phrase alone, magnetic footprint, is one of those pieces of science language that sounds almost too poetic to be real. A moon orbiting through Jupiter's magnetic field can help imprint a luminous signature onto the giant's aurora. It is as though the moons leave brief, light-written notes on Jupiter's polar skies. And because Jupiter's magnetic field is so strong and so dynamic, the auroras are not quiet decorations. They are energetic, restless, ongoing expressions of a giant engine of magnetism. The poles glow while the planet spins beneath them. Invisible particles race and collide. The atmosphere responds in bands of light. You can picture the top of Jupiter crowned with vast, shimmering emissions, far more powerful than our own auroras, flickering above a world already full of storms and rushing cloud bands. The sheer extravagance of it is very soothing, mostly because you're not responsible for any part of it. Then comes the music or what passes for music in a place where no human orchestra would survive long enough to tune up. Jupiter emits powerful radio waves, and when those emissions are converted into sound by scientific instruments, they can become eerie whistles, chirps, crackles, and howling tones. Space is not carrying ordinary sound the way air does on Earth. So Jupiter is not literally booming across the void like a giant celestial speaker system. But its electromagnetic activity can be translated into audible form. And when it is, the result is unforgettable. The giant sings in static and ghostly pulses. Some of these radio emissions were detected long before we had the close-up imagery that later made Jupiter feel visually intimate. Even early radio astronomers learned that the giant was a strong source of radio waves. That fact alone gives the planet a different emotional texture. Jupiter is not just something you can see. It is something that broadcasts. It sends out signatures of its inner activity into space, little reminders that the giant is electrically alive. Those emissions are tied to the magnetic field, to charged particles, to interactions with the solar wind and with moons like Io. In some cases, the radio bursts are strongly influenced by Io's position, which is another delightful bit of family involvement. Jupiter and Io keep finding ways to collaborate on strange beauty. The moon provides volcanic material. It also helps shape radio and auroral activity through its interaction with Jupiter's magnetic field. A volcanic moon helping a giant planet sing is exactly the sort of sentence that makes the universe feel both majestic and a little smug. If you ever hear recordings made from these translated signals, the effect can be strangely emotional. They do not sound like melody in the ordinary sense. They sound more like haunted weather, like electricity thinking out loud, like the voice of a storm turned into code and then into sound. There are whistles that rise and fall, rough bursts of static, abrupt chirps, tones that seem almost mechanical until you remember no machine is making them in the human sense. It is the giant planet speaking through magnetism. The result is both eerie and deeply beautiful. And once you know Jupiter has this invisible soundtrack, the planet becomes harder to think of as silent. Even when you picture it calmly hanging in the night sky, some part of your imagination begins to supply an undertone, a faint chorus of crackling radio song beneath the visible stillness. The cloud bands rotate. Lightning flashes deep below. Auroras glow above the poles. Radio wave pour toi. Jupiter becomes not just an object you observe, but an environment of layered expression. That may be the most enchanting part of the whole section of its story. Jupiter is a planet where several kinds of beauty are happening at once in different forms. Visible beauty in the cloud bands and storms. Electrical beauty in the lightning. Magnetic beauty in the auroras. Invisible sonic beauty in the radio emissions. The giant rewards almost every kind of curiosity. Look with your eyes, and it is beautiful. Measure its field, and it becomes stranger. Translate its emissions, and it becomes almost musical. It keeps meeting attention with more atmosphere, more mystery, more scale. Even the poles themselves, as seen by Juno, are different from the familiar striped face of Jupiter's middle latitudes. Instead of long cloud bands, the polar regions are crowded with swirling cyclones arranged in remarkable patterns, like clusters of giant storms circling around one another with geometric calm. Imagine all of that beneath auroral glow and occasional lightning, wrapped inside a magnetic field of staggering reach. The poles of Jupiter start to feel like the stage where the planet's most secret performances happen, hidden from simple telescopic views, revealed only when spacecraft dare to look closely. And yet none of this breaks the sleepy mood. Somehow it deepens it. Jupiter becomes more alive, more energetic, more extravagantly itself, but also more absorbing. The giant keeps proving that you can be full of force without seeming frantic, full of motion without losing grace. Lightning does not make it feel noisy. Auroras do not make it feel flashy. Radio emissions do not make it feel intrusive. Everything about Jupiter arrives through distance transformed into wonder. It is the perfect planet for a tired mind to contemplate because it is magnificent without being demanding. You simply keep discovering that the bright wanderer has more layers. The calm point of light contains storms. The storms contain lightning. The poles carry crowns of light. The magnetic field fills space with invisible currents and song. The moons help write some of those songs. Gravity shapes the larger neighborhood. Rings drift quietly around the giant. Each fact makes the planet bigger inwardly, not just physically. Jupiter becomes a whole weather and light symphony, turning into cold dark beyond Mars. And once you have listened to that symphony for a while, once you have watched the lightning flash behind the clouds and the auroras burn above the poles and the radio voices murmur through the magnetosphere, there's only one direction left to go. Downward, beneath the cloud tops, into the immense, soft unknown where the visible beauty gives way to pressure, depth, hidden layers, and one last mystery: the giant still keeps mostly to itself. And that is where Jupiter becomes most beautiful of all, because after all the brightness and scale and cloud bands and moons and hidden rings and auroras, the giant still keeps its greatest mystery below the surface you can actually see. The upper clouds are only the beginning. They're the part Jupiter allows to be photographed, admired, mapped, and turned into familiar images. Beneath them, the planet becomes deeper, stranger, softer in one sense, and far more powerful in another. It stops behaving like anything your body knows how to understand. You can no longer imagine walking there, or landing there, or placing a hand against some stable piece of ground and saying, yes, this is the planet. Jupiter gently removes that possibility. It remains a world, but not a world made for footsteps. That makes it perfect for the imagination at bedtime. You do not have to solve Jupiter. You do not have to reduce it to something tidy. You can simply descend in thought, layer by layer, and let the giant become more mysterious as you go. The visible cloud tops are where your eye first meets the planet. Those pale belts and darker bands spread across the enormous turning globe. They look soft, and in a visual sense they are soft, because clouds always carry that suggestion of softness, even when they belong to a world that would absolutely destroy any visitor careless enough to confuse appearance with hospitality. The upper atmosphere is cold, with ammonia clouds drifting through sunlight weakened by distance from the sun. Those highest layers are beautiful, luminous, and almost deceptively familiar. Clouds are one of the few things Jupiter and Earth seem to share without argument. But below those bright upper layers, the pressure begins to rise. The atmosphere grows thicker. The temperatures climb. The chemistry changes. The clouds you see from space are not sitting above a comfortable sky and then a neat solid surface somewhere below. They are just the topmost visible veil of an atmosphere that deepens and deepens until the ordinary idea of sky starts to fail. If you were descending, the light would gradually dim into a thicker, stranger brightness. The colors above would fade into denser haze. The winds would still move. The pressure would keep increasing. Jupiter would keep becoming more Jupiter. That increase is not casual. It is enormous. On Earth, pressure changes with altitude in ways your body can notice, but mostly survive within reason. A diver feels it underwater. An airplane cabin has to account for it. A mountain's summit reminds your lungs that sea level have been doing them a quiet favor all along. Jupiter takes that familiar physical reality and extends it into something nearly mythic. The deeper you go, the more the atmosphere presses in with crushing force. Gas becomes denser and denser, packed tighter by the weight of all the layers above. The planet turns depth itself into a form of power. And yet the transition is not a sudden jump from gas to solid. That is one of the strangest and most relaxing facts about Jupiter. There may not be a single clear surface at all in the way you instinctively want one. Instead, the atmosphere thickens gradually into fluid-like layers. The giant does not offer an obvious floor. It offers continuity, more pressure, More density, more heat, more mystery. Jupiter is a planet of gradual surrender, where one layer yields to the next and the next yields again. As you imagine going deeper, the hydrogen that makes up so much of Jupiter begins to behave in less familiar ways. At the upper levels, it is a gas, light and diffuse by cosmic standards. Farther down, under immense pressure, it becomes a liquid. That change alone is extraordinary. You move from cloud realms into a vast body of liquid hydrogen, a form of matter almost impossible to picture in human everyday terms because everyday life has done you the courtesy of never requiring you to imagine oceans made not of water, but the most basic element in the universe, compressed in a fluid form by the weight of a planet. There is something deeply grand about that. Earth has oceans you can name and sail and write songs about. Jupiter has depths of liquid hydrogen hidden below cloud layers, and the planet keeps carrying them without fuss, as if this were the most natural thing in the world. The giant is full of basic cosmic material made exotic by pressure and depth. It takes the simplest element and turns it into something majestic. Deeper still, the pressure rises to such extremes that hydrogen enters one of Jupiter's most famous and fascinating states. It becomes metallic hydrogen. Even the phrase has a wonderful feel to it, like something halfway between alchemy and physics, which is exactly why people remember it. Under enough compression, hydrogen is believed to behave like an electrical conductor. It takes on properties that make it act more like a metal. Somewhere inside Jupiter, beneath layers of cloud and gas and liquid, there may be enormous regions of this strange metallic hydrogen, shimmering only in the imagination because no human eye will ever simply look upon it directly. That hidden layer matters enormously. It is thought to help generate Jupiter's immense magnetic field, the same magnetic power that feeds the giant auroras and radio emissions you just listened to in your mind. So when you imagine descending into Jupiter, you are not moving toward a dead interior. You are moving toward the hidden engine room of some of the planet's most beautiful visible phenomena. The clouds above, the glowing poles, the charged particle symphony, all of it may owe something to those deep metallic layers turning under pressure in the dark. You can feel how different Jupiter is from a rocky world here. Earth keeps many of its secrets underground, but you still know what ground is. Jupiter withholds that certainty. Maybe there's a core buried deep inside, perhaps made of heavier elements, perhaps diffuse and mixed into surrounding layers more than older textbook pictures once suggested. Scientists continue refining their understanding of what exactly lies at the center. That uncertainty is not a weakness in the story. It is part of the beauty. Jupiter remains partly unread. Even after spacecraft, probes, telescopes, and all our clever mathematics, the giant still keeps some of its interior blurred. It allows us near. It is not completely open. That privacy feels right. A planet this large, this old, this layered, should keep some darkness for itself. It should have a center not easily surrendered to neat diagrams. There's a kind of dignity in that. Jupiter has shown you plenty already. It is shown in the sky. It has revealed its stripes, its long red storm, its moon kingdom, its secret rings, its lightning and auroras in radio voice. It is allowed to leave part of itself in shadow. And there's another soft wonder in all of this. Jupiter radiates more heat than it receives from the sun deep inside. The giant still carries energy outward. It is not merely basking in borrowed light. It glows with its own slow internal inheritance, releasing warmth generated by long gravitational compression and ancient formation. In a quiet way, Jupiter is still cooling, still settling, still giving off more than it takes in. That makes it feel self-possessed. The giant is not passive. It has an inward life. If you imagine drifting downward forever, the whole descent becomes less like falling and more like being absorbed. The bright topmost layers disappear above you. The pressure mounts. The light becomes alien. The atmosphere thickens from gas into fluid-like depth. Hydrogen changes character. The ordinary language of weather gives way to the language of matter under stress. Somewhere below it all, perhaps, lies a core still not fully understood. There is no comfortable platform waiting. No rocky shore. Just increasing inwardness, the planet becoming more itself as you move toward its hidden center. That may be the most relaxing fact of all about Jupiter. It is not exhausted by being seen. Some things in life lose their magic when explained too quickly. Jupiter does not. Knowledge only opens more depth. You learn the size, and the wonder grows. You learn the cloud structure, and the wonder grows. You learn the storm has lived for centuries, that the moons circle in elegant families, that the rings are real, that the auroras burn brighter than any in the solar system, that the magnetic field sings, that metallic hydrogen may turn invisibly in the deep, and the wonder still keeps growing. Jupiter remains greater on the inside than your first glance could ever suggest. You can almost feel the entire planet as one continuous act of grandeur. The bright wanderer in the night sky is linked to the clouds. The clouds are linked to the storms. The storms are linked to the fast rotation and internal heat. The moons participate in the magnetic drama. The hidden interior helps power the unseen field. The field lights the poles and fills space with radio song. Every layer connects to another. Jupiter is not a collection of facts. It is a single magnificent system, and that system has been turning quietly for billions of years. Long before human eyes found it, long before ancient astronomers named it, long before telescopes caught its moons and spacecraft tasted its atmosphere. Jupiter was already there, gathering cloud over cloud, holding its storms, circling the sun with patient weight, carrying its inner furnace, wearing its faint rings, keeping its companions close. The giant has always had this slow confidence, this sense that there is no need to hurry revelation. It can wait for you to notice. You didn't notice. First as a bright lamp in the dark, then as the biggest of the planets, then as a face of painted weather, then as the keeper of the great red spot, then as a world of fast days and long years, then as the center of a moon kingdom, then as a giant with hidden rings, a bodyguard with strong gravity, a singer of radio songs, a bearer of auroras, and finally as a depth without a floor, a soft unknown where the visible world dissolves into pressure, heat, and hidden metallic seas. Jupiter keeps widening in your mind until it no longer feels merely like a planet to memorize. It feels like a place to rest your thoughts. So you let the giant remain there, immense and luminous and not fully knowable, turning slowly in the dark beyond Mars, beyond the little daily concerns you carried into the evening, beyond all the clocks and alerts and unfinished conversations. Jupiter does not need anything from you. It simply offers scale, beauty, mystery, and the quiet reassurance that the universe still contains things too large and too elegant to be used up by explanation. And with that, the picture can begin to soften. The cloud bands lose a little of their detail first, becoming smoother, more painterly. The great red spot turns from a storm into a warm oval of color resting in old weather. The moons become 4 small lights nearby, then a larger family hidden in the dark, all of them circling faithfully. The rings fade into a thin dust halo. The auroras keep glowing above the poles, but farther away now, gentler, like crowns of light seen through sleep-heavy eyes. Even the deep interior, with its pressure and liquid hydrogen and strange metallic heart, becomes less a puzzle and more a presence, a quiet, steady center inside the giant. You can let Jupiter drift back out into the night sky where you first found it. Not because it has become smaller, but because your mind no longer needs to hold every detail at once. The giant is still all of it. The scale, the storms, the hidden depths, the slow magnificence. But it can gather itself again into one calm golden light, shining steadily above a sleeping world. And as that light hangs there in the dark, you can feel your own thoughts growing lighter too, less crowded, less urgent. The day does not need to be solved tonight. The unfinished things can wait. Jupiter has been patient for billions of years. You are allowed a few quiet hours. The sky is wide. The giant is far away. The room around you is soft and still. Somewhere beyond the window, beyond the dark roofs and roads and sleeping trees, beyond the moonlit air and the long hush of midnight, Jupiter continues its old, beautiful turning. Its cloud tops remain bright under a distant sun. Its great storms keep their slow motion. Its moons circle faithfully through the dark. Its hidden heart stays buried beneath layers of mystery. Its auroras burn in silence above the poles. And none of it needs anything more from you than this one simple thing: to rest, to loosen your grip on the day, to let the mind float the way those pale bands float across the giant planet, steady and unhurried, to let the night become large enough to hold everything, to let the last of your thoughts settle like fine dust into darkness, and to follow that calm golden planet very gently into sleep.